So I have a little presentation for you guys. And this is going to be a little bit heavy. So I want your attention for this right now. I'm going to give you guys a presentation, which I don't even think like software is separate. It's just bonus if you need plan perspective specifically. Like obviously it's good to know. We have one more tutorial, so I'll show more drawing techniques then. Like I don't think it's that serious right now. But I wanted to give you guys a lecture on composition and different kinds of drawings so you guys can get an idea, because I feel like some people are lost with how to approach this, and there's specific things that you need to keep in mind, and you just have to kind of know what the expectation is, how much time you have to execute everything, like what kind of drawing you're going for, because it's different for everybody, right? So we're gonna start with different drawing styles. So you'll probably choose from one of these. So this is line drawing from a firm called Atelier Bow Wow, and they show like a lot of texture and stuff, and they show a lot of like structural details, and they even have these kind of annotations that go really in depth. Can I zoom in? Can't zoom in, right? Okay, that's fine. But yeah, they have like these annotations on the material and stuff. Just a unique drawing style. Like you guys will probably come across this firm more often throughout your undergrad. This is from a book called Manual of Section. They have a lot of good references for drawings. But yeah, these two is pretty much the same style, like black and white line drawings. The line weights are really important. Some hatches to show texture, or like fills to show depth. That's one style. I think that's a style that most of you guys will be going for, but like it's really open. Like in other studios, in drawing classes, like I think it's recommended that you guys experiment with different drawing types, learn how to implement color and texture and stuff like that, because in design studios and stuff, you're going to be restricted, and your prof will like let you be less experimental unless you already have a good representation style going for you. So I think you want to figure that out in this course. So these two are black and white line drawings. There's another style of like collage render, and these are done in Photoshop. So I'm gonna maybe introduce some basic Photoshop today. We'll see, because we're low on time. So this is collage, like it's done in Photoshop with like so you have a 3D reference, and then you have like 2D textures, and you kind of fill each thing in manually. It's pretty illustrative and intuitive. A lot of people say it's easy, so I think this is good route if you want to take this. Then there's like two different types of rendering. So you can have a unrealistic render, where it's like colorful, playful, kind of like a little bit of a fantasy render. And then there are like realistic renders where we're not going for realistic renders in this. But I just wanted to show you what that looks like, because it's a really different vibe from this, which I think you're encouraged to a little bit, because you can even see there are like lines over top on here, right? And they're like, you could see the brick lines and stuff like that, but it's a render with it. This is just pure render. It looks like maybe there's lines shown. Yeah, I guess this is like a hybrid style, which happens like when you do unrealistic render, but then when you do a realistic render, you don't need to show any lines. And the important thing about this drawing that you're making is you need good line work. And then these are kind of like hybrid drawing styles. So you can see it's like render and line work. And then here's another hybrid style. So you could see like it's a little bit collaged. You have like color added manually. You have like a render with a model. And most of you guys, I think, like if you don't figure it out now, over the next couple of years, you'll probably end up with your own hybrid style. Like that's what happened to me. So what are you guys actually making? What's the goal? So to start off masters, we had this studio, like a summer intensive, where we have to make one complex drawing. So it's kind of like the assignment that you guys have right now. We have a precedent about like a building, or like a part of the city or something, and you need to tell a story about it. So this drawing is like the best example, and like I've actually watched his tutorial that was for the course on how he came up with this, and it's a lot of iteration. Like he didn't end up with this playful composition right off the bat. But you can see there's like this shelf kind of thing. Let me draw over top. So you can see, oh, wrong color. there's this shelf kind of thing happening. And then there's like something underneath the shelf. There's this kind of like play. This is what I mean when I tell you guys like play with scale, because you see how this stuff is at like an urban scale. I mean, you have a dog pissing, that's kind of funny. But this is at an urban scale. And then you see like this person is basically the size of a building. And then this hand kind of this was the precedent. So this hand kind of picks apart this building, and you can see how like different parts of the composition are connected in playful ways. Like this firefighter standing on top of a building, blowing this thing out. And then over here, this is kind of like your secondary drawings. So he has this shelf showing the history of the sign at different points in time. This is a really good example of complex drawing. But okay. Next. This is another example I found. I think there's too much going on, and this is not something that you guys should aim for, but I just wanted to give you an idea, because you have like this weird drawing here that blends into this whole composition. And then you have this part, this separate part. You have a plan here, secondary, you have secondary drawings here. These secondary drawings connect to this. And these, I'm guessing, are buildings that you can find in this composition. Same with this. Like, I think these secondary drawings, this is what you don't want. Like, you want things to blend in with your composition like this or like this. You can have moments of these, but I think me and Connor want you guys to limit this as much as possible, where you're just like secondary drawing over top, floating in space, like cool. But there's obviously a lot going on, and like it's meant, you need to kind of see the drawing in its entirety to understand whatever story that they're trying to tell. Okay. This is another thing. I mean, people have done this in the past for ARC100. Not sure how many of you would like this approach, but it's like telling a story through this kind of like comic book representation, like a sequence. Yeah. This was a complex drawing that I did for a seminar in 4th year. And you can see there's a lot going on. So I'll kind of like break down the different drawings. There's, oops. What? Where'd it go? Okay, my bad. So you have a plan here. You have like another plan, plan, diagrammatic plans, so many plans. And then you have this base plan in the back that you can see, right? And then you have this kind of ISO here. You have this perspective of like what the drone is seeing. It's kind of like exploded, like all the different parts in ISO. You have it tying back to the location. This was kind of like a forensic study. So you have this satellite. The satellite is like connected to the drone. There's a lot of stuff going on here. And you can see there are like these kind of paths that guide you to how to read the drawing. It's like 2 figure eights that kind of connect different parts of the drawing. And you can see like these elements are floating. Oh, let me clear this because it's getting a little hectic. But you can see like these elements are floating, right? But it's like it's positioned in relation to other elements. So this satellite is spotting this. This satellite is communicating with this satellite, communicating with this. Like everything is connected. So you guys want to think of your composition in this way. Like I didn't even think of the composition. Like I was doing this with a partner. So I just did most of the drawings, and he actually figured this out because like he's an artist. So you guys kind of have to get in your creative headspace. Like you have to think like an artist for this part. It's less, I think it's less architecture. Like it's more, you have to think of what kind of drawing, like think of it like a painting, I think. But here's another example. So this was from that summer intensive. So I took the summer intensive in August, and I did a lot of research on my precedent. And like I did so much research that I was thinking like, okay, if I model my precedent, which is this, I put it in the middle, and then I model 2 things related to my precedent. That fills up most of the page, and then I have like my secondary drawings where I fill the rest of the page with other elements and I see how to divide my page into spaces. And I think it's important. I was telling this to somebody earlier, like with something like this, you need a clear direction or vision of like, what is your space? What is the story about your space? It's kind of like you're not really researching, but you have all this information and understanding of the space because you've been drawing it, visiting it for a couple months. So you have all the stuff that you want to say, and it's like you want to picture, how do I want like, what do I want others to see so that they understand what I'm trying to say about this space? And if you can picture something like, this is what I want to show and this is how I want to compose it, once you have the strong vision in your head, all you need is a sketch, because then it's more about executing it, because you have the narrative, you have the sketch of how your page is going to be filled up, and then you can just go from this to something like this, where you can see that all of the elements that I kind of sketched out, how the page would be filled and where, like you could see that it's corresponding with this. Obviously things changed, there were revisions, but overall the structure stayed the same. So basically you want to make a skeleton for this drawing. Once you have the skeleton, you're good. 2 weeks easy. All you do, model, color, whatever. But I think this is the hardest part, like understanding what you want to say about the space, why you're putting things on the page this way, why certain things are bigger than other things, why certain things that are small or maybe more detailed than others. Because you can see the actual building context that I have is way more detailed than the rest of the other stuff. So it's all curated for how it lands to the viewer. And this is a complex drawing that I think all you guys should reference. I mean, even I can't do this. Like, this probably took this guy months to do, but let's go in and see how many actual drawings are in this one drawing. So you have a section here, you have a section, and then you have, this color is not really showing. You have the section, you have like an ISO, you have an ISO section, and then you have this kind of plan in the back. And then, yeah, you have a plan. I think this is part of that ISO section. I'm not really sure. And then you have this kind of, either this is the same plan. It looks like it's shifting in plan perspective here. And then you have like another perspective in the back. And this looks like maybe it's part of the same perspective, but it could also read as an elevation. And this is all one drawing. Like, I only went through one column, but this person kind of divided it into these grids, and he does the same thing. Like, this section is kind of the main focus, and then he's illustrating what's going on in each section with all these different perspectives and ISOs stitched together, where it reads seamlessly, like one thing's on top of each other blending into another, but it all reads as one drawing. So I think this is the approach you guys should try to take with your secondary drawings. Like, here is a perspective, here you have kind of, this section is like a little bit ISO, here is another perspective, it's cut off, like it's drawings on top of each other, but it all reads as one. And I mean, we could go for the same thing, we could do the same thing with this, but I think you guys get the point. With, you want to think, how are you breaking up your page with the different drawings that you're putting? Where are edges meeting other edges? How is it going to read? Like, this person did this part intentionally, right? Like, where the water can spill into this, the water like flows through. So it's all very intentional. And that's why I think this is the hardest part. But okay. So your process, I just wrote down some random stuff because I've had different workflows, and I think my workflow for a specific drawing style is going to be different from yours. But I mean, I just made some samples so you guys can like get an idea and try to understand what route you're going to take. So like, for line drawing, if you have a base Rhino model and then you have your line work, then you can just manually go in and start to draw in ISO, and you can keep revising that, and then it will build the detail in the drawing. And since you have that base Rhino model, anytime you want to go in and edit something and get like a 3D version of that line work, you still have the option to to do that and keep going back to your Rhino, keep going back into Illustrator, doing things manually. So that's why I would consider it iterative. I think a lot of you guys are going to work like this. For collage render, I think it's a little bit different because it's the same where you have a base Rhino model, but then you're going to want to create this kind of asset library. So you're going to want to go on Google, Pinterest, find a bunch, like, I'm not going to do this right now because I don't know how many of you will go for collage because you'll probably need Photoshop, but if you create an asset library, like you're going to find a bunch of images that you're going to manipulate in Photoshop and then start pasting into here. Like this person, whoever made this, probably had an asset library of these people, probably had some kind of asset library of these trees. They had a color palette to reference. They had some asset library of these kind of street lamps. And then I mean, I wouldn't consider the snow an asset because you don't have to download it, but like it kind of is an asset because you're going to go with a brush, like a white brush, and then add this effect manually. So like all of these elements that you're adding, if you're doing collage, like you should know that beforehand. So you just go in and put everything there once you have the base Rhino model. Like I think this is really important for a lot of, because like every workflow that I'm showing, you need some kind of Rhino model. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's the thing with collage. Like that's just a thing with iterative workflows. The Rhino model, it can just be a base model and then you can do all the work somewhere else and go back and forth. But anyway, once you have the library for this, you fill it in with different colors and textures, and then you could see they even put like glow around different things. And then you just basically, once you have like the architecture in color and everything and textured out, then you can array all your different assets of people and trees and whatever. And then the last, this is another drawing that I did, which is kind of like hybrid. So how I usually go about it, I mean, I've done both of these, not so much collage before. I've done a lot of line drawing and I've used this, but like now I kind of prefer to have like a detailed Rhino model, line work, and then I render it. And then with a bunch of different renders, like I kind of do post-production, and then it's a mix. Like, I mean, maybe this is poorly listed. But like rendering and post-production, that also gets you, that also like you can change the color of whatever you rendered and stuff like that. But I did have, like with this logic, I did have assets that I used to create this composition in the first place. Like I had these assets that I was going to place here to fill in space. I had these assets, like everything's working. We actually went in Rhino and like we pointed all these satellites and saw how it would come off the frame and how it was like related to this. Just be mindful of how everything's taking space on the page, and like maybe it would make more sense if quickly I go over this narrative. So what is this drawing about? It's about how there's this hidden CIA drone base in the middle of the Saudi Arabian desert. And the only way that it was spotted was from satellite imagery. So you have these kind of satellites floating around. You have these meteors as like a playful thing. You have the contours because the contours are like, they're like the focal point of the concept because the contours is what allowed this to be discovered. And now we're like framing it in this thing where it looks like it's part of the earth, but then you have a perspective where it's just that base and you have like this kind of drone landing on it. So everything's working, but it's not necessarily realistic. It's like curated to what specifically I'm trying to say in this drawing. So now I'm going to go to software tutorial. Okay. So I modeled this thing in Rhino and it looks really boring. But I'm sure you guys have started to use clipping plane. So I can just type clipping plane, press enter, and then you can just drop it down. And it's going to clip in plan because that's how you're dropping it down. And I'm going to use Gumball and kind of show you what happens when, as you slide up the clipping plane, but I want to show you how to do both section perspective and plan perspective properly. So it's kind of the same logic. So you can see I'm in perspective right now, right? and it's showing my clipping plane like in properties, and it says views clip, perspective, top, front, right. So if I go to my 4 views, it's only showing that it's clipped in perspective because I have perspective checked. If I check top, it's going to clip there too. So how I want it is, this is viewing front, right? Like this is the front. I'm kind of looking that way. So let me just move this over. Like you can move this over as much as you want. It's going to clip like a line across that. So it doesn't matter where this is. It will do it like infinitely across that axis. So let's go to front. And the reason why I'm going to front is because like this is showing towards the front, right? I'm gonna go into top and then do plan perspective after. So let's go into front, and then let's tick where this says front. And I'll just put it into Arctic so it's easier to see. So now we have this thing. It says parallel projection. So what you're seeing is elevation section. So when we go to this, you want to go, there's 2 options. There's perspective and 2-point perspective. You want to go to 2-point perspective. And now if you hold control and then zoom in, now you can see that it's in perspective. But the thing is, you only want to zoom in and out, and you only want to use shift to pan, because this section, oh, okay, well, I just did that here. It's not horizontal or perpendicular anymore, right? Like it's not orthogonal. Now you have your lines on an angle. The thing about 2-point perspective, you have to make sure it's not perspective, because with 2-point perspective, all your lines are vertical. All your lines are perfectly vertical. If you do perspective, it starts to, I don't know if you can see that, but it starts to get wonky. Your lines aren't straight anymore. So make sure when you're doing perspectives to keep it to 2-point. Okay, but anyway, you can see how I moved that, right? Like that's why I'm saying you only want to zoom in and out, and you only want to hold shift, right click, and pan, because once you rotate it, this is not straight anymore. It's not proper. So let's go back into parallel. Oh, that's weird. Let me put it back into front. And go from parallel to 2-point perspective. So now I'm only holding shift, and you can see that this is like everything's at right angles, right? So maybe I'll show you lens length with plan perspective, but it's the same process. So like I'm moving around and trying to get my angle, and I want you guys to know it's fine if I do this and I do a make 2D here, because what you're going to see, like I will be able to move this around on the composition. It doesn't matter how it looks on the screen, like it matters what I'm trying to capture. So if I want these moments underneath, I'm gonna have to go from like this weird view and do a make 2D from here, because if I'm trying to like get the whole thing on my screen, it's not ever gonna work out for me. So keep in mind, you can do weird stuff and you can make a 2D from here, even though it looks weird on your screen right now. You're gonna figure out how it fits on the page later, right? But anyway, so let's do it from top view. So I'm gonna hold shift with gumball and then put it in top. And then I want to go into top. And then I have to do show top. If you click on your clipping plane, the option will come up. And also, if you hide your clipping plane, it will still clip whatever's there. If you don't want it to work, you will either have to uncheck it, or you have to delete the clipping plane altogether. But okay. So now we have it in plan. So I don't know why it's, I mean, okay. So now we have it in plan, and then we want to go back to this. So it says parallel, and we do the same thing, 2-point perspective, right? And it kind of like resets that, but it's the same thing. If you use control, like you can zoom in with your scroll wheel, but it doesn't give you as much control. But if you control or command on Mac, if you hold that down and then you right click, you can zoom in and out with more precision, and then shift and right click to kind of pan around. So this is how your plan perspective should look. It should look like your room is like offset and it has this stuff. Like some of you guys had it like this, like that. That looks weird. So a nice way to do it is like let's drop a point like in the dead center of your room. And then if I go into top again, and then do 2-point perspective, and then zoom select the center of this. Now, if I zoom out from the center, like that's pretty close to a true center as you can get. Like you can always do it like off axis if that's what you want. But I think if plan perspective is your main drawing, should look centered. It should look centered. But okay, that's that. Another thing is lens length. So I think this is really important because you guys are gonna want to play around with lens length a lot. So lens length, I have it to 28 right now. By default, it's 50. By default, it's 50. So this is 50. I put it to 28 because that's human optical focal length, whatever. So this is how it would look if like you were in the space. But the lower you go, the wider it gets and the wonkier it gets. But the more your depth of field is exaggerated. So you can go lower. What the hell? You can even go as low as like 5, but stuff starts looking weird. Like you see, like depth of field gets crazy. So I wouldn't go this low. I've never went that low, but like the lowest you can go at maybe 15. It just gives you a different effect. Like stuff that's closer, like you see, when I'm in perspective like this, it feels really enclosed. But then let's say I do 50, completely different focal point, right? Like it doesn't feel like you're in the space. It kind of feels like this is what you guys are used to looking at in Rhino, but then I do 15 and it's kind of like you're sitting in the space yourself. So you can play with a distortion like that because this captures all the detail at 15, but then when I put it to 50, it's like, it's a little weird, right? When I zoom out. So just be mindful of that. And then another thing I wanted to show you guys is named views. So let's say that, I mean, let me do this again. And then when you do 2-point perspective, notice it will default your lens length to something and you can change it after. That's fine. But let's say that this is the kind of view that you're looking for, right? You can go here. If it's not here, you can go click on this cog and then take name views, and then it will show up here. And then here you can save as, and then section perspective. And now I can like move around, whatever. I can like do whatever I want in Rhino. But then when I double click on this, and notice how it saves it without the clipping plane. Like it saved it as if my clipping plane wasn't there. But if I double click on this, it will take me back to that exact same view every time. So you don't have to worry about like not having it in the same position in your composition, because once you set this and you're satisfied with it, you can model, make 2D, mix different make 2Ds together all you want, and it should line up perfectly. But okay, that's that for Rhino. I was gonna show you guys hatches and Photoshop. I was gonna show you guys Rhino Illustrator, but I feel like I should save that for next week because there's like a lot I can do, and I think at this stage, I think it's good that if you guys just know how to frame things properly in Rhino, like I think the most important step for this stage is coming up with some kind of sketch that you have a vision for it. Like you should be able to see the end product when you sketch it out. Like maybe not exactly, some things are bound to change, shift around, but you should have a pretty good idea of this is what I want to show. This is kind of what it's going to look like, but most of it will be represented as you're planning it. Because I think once and you guys can like continue Rhino modeling as much as you can, so you can get ready to kind of do the next step, which is illustration. But I think the first 2 steps are like having a good narrative concept sketch, and then having some sort of base Rhino model detailed to like whatever you're satisfied with. And then I think once you have those 2, then next week I can show you guys tutorial on like doing actual illustrations in Illustrator and Photoshop. And I think doing it next week also gives you enough time to think what drawing style will make the most sense for your composition. Because I think the drawing style reflects like your character as an artist, but it should also depend on the narrative and what you're trying to say a little bit. Like, for example, these are two very different drawing styles that I've done, right? Like this is more like visual, like artistic. This is more like forensic, kind of investigative research. So both like speak to their own qualities. Both are complex drawings. So yeah, we can do Illustrator and Illustrator and Photoshop next week, and it's 7. So I think it's good for now. Thank you guys.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out our Gumroad in the description for free 3D and 2D assets.